The most valuable resource we have in life is time. Some might argue oxygen. Okay, I'll grant you that one too. But even with the concept of oxygen, you still need time. And we have a finite amount of it. So as a sports fan, sometimes you hate the thought of having lost seasons because they are wasted seasons. You don't want your team to be a loser. Why would you want to be around that? You want to experience winning. You want to be associated with winners. It makes you feel better about yourself. And all of these things are certainly understandable. But every once in a while, a lost season is a great season because of the bigger picture that can be accomplished. Now, bear in mind, of course, because the Cincinnati Bengals are the Cincinnati Bengals, and they still occasionally like to bungle things up. They couldn't even get that right. If you're going to be bad, suck, go all the way with it, and get a big-time pick in the draft. Nonetheless, Bengals fans still have to be pleased with the results of 2018 because for no other reason than that being year 16 of the Marvin Lewis experience was the last year of the Marvin Lewis experience. Can I get an amen and hallelujah? 16 years. And sure, Marvin Lewis did bring you some success, but the time had clearly come to move on. And even though Mike Brown wanted to continue to not believe otherwise, 2018 was finally the validation he needed to know that, yeah, it was time for a change. Because even when you looked at this Bengals team to start off the season, I mean, let's not forget, this team started off 4-1. They were like the quietest 4-1 in the league. They were even 5-3 halfway through the season. Clearly, based off of record alone, a playoff contender at both stretches of the season. And yet nobody talked about him because nobody believed in him, and everybody knew it was smoke and mirrors. The early season success was really a fraud, and reality was eventually going to set in, as it most certainly did. And now, sure, you can blame injuries like to Andy Dalton, but even when he played, he's mediocre. Sure, losing A.J. Green for almost half the year certainly doesn't help and is directly associated with that second half slide. But Tyler Eifert only played 4 games. Again, what doesn't he only play 4 to 8 games in a season? But even then, this team just wasn't that good. That's why they lost their next 5 in a row after starting 5-3 and 7 of their last 8. They went 1-5 in the division. It was time for Marvin Lewis to fucking go. Especially when you look at the defensive side of the ball, where they were 32nd in total yards allowed, 32nd against the pass, 29th against the run. Their defense absolutely sucked. So with an offense that was bad, a defensive-minded head coach coaching one of the worst defensive units in the league, like, this is not hard to figure out why the hell this guy needed to go. Clearly, it was time for a change. Clearly. You know, and you look at the things like the drafting of John Ross in the first round of 2017. It was a huge home run swing, and so far it's been a massive strikeout. 21 catches for 210 yards in 2018. Sure, 7 touchdowns, but who gives a shit? The guy didn't contribute very much. Yes, Joe Mixon went over 1,000 yards rushing. Tyler Boyd had over 1,000 yards receiving, but it's just not enough. Just not enough. And when you look at this Bengals team, it's easy to understand why they weren't very good. It's a shame, though, when you look at guys like Geno Atkins and Carlos Dunlap, they are being wasted in this situation. I feel really bad for an A.J. Green who was hurt a good portion of the second half of 2018 season because I look at him as one of those really unsung, underrated players in the National Football League. But more so, I realize now he has been 8 years through his career in the NFL. And he's going to be pushing 30 soon. And he's associated with this garbage. To me, if there was a player that had a right to sit there and ask to be traded and should have that request honored if so desired, is A.J. Green. He deserves better than the crap he's had to deal with in Cincinnati over the years. It's a damn shame. So now the Bengals, no more Marvin Lewis. It sounds like it's going to be that Zach Taylor guy, you know, one of those guys he knows Sean McVay, and as a result, that automatically makes him qualified to be a head coach in today's NFL. It sounds like he will be the next head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals, which, you know what, you had a defensive-minded guy for all those years, an offensive-minded guy makes some sense. Because frankly, I guess it doesn't really matter because both sides of the ball for the Bengals stunk when all was said and done this past season. A good thing for the Bengals is they're going to have some salary cap space. They got a little over $50 million to play with right now. They'll have to make some decisions on guys like Geno Atkins and Carlos Dunlap. You would think that you would want to bring both of those guys into the fold. You would think. But maybe if you want to do a full rebuild, maybe you would save that cap money and not bring them in. But goddamn, I got to figure like you would bring those two back. Will you bring back Michael Johnson, Vincent Ray, Darquise Denner, Josh Shaw? I don't know about all of that. You might retain a couple of them. You might not. But part of the reason you find the Bengals in the situation that they're in is because recently their drafting has been less than stellar, less than effective. You go back to 2013. Yeah, it was a bad draft class in general, and for a lot of teams specifically. They had some success there with Tyler Eifert and Gio Bernard and Sean Williams, but Eifert's barely healthy. So how much does he really count? That 2014 draft, the only notable player they have left is Darquise Dennard, and he's been a bust, really, for all intents and purposes. He's a first-round pick, and he's really been a backup. In 2015, Cedric Obehi was a guy you took in the first round to eventually replace Andrew Whitworth, and that ain't happened. And then you look at round 2, drafting Jake Fisher. He was also a big bust. 2016 did bring you William Jackson and Tyler Boyd, Vigil, Billings. But you look at those previous 3 years classes, they weren't very good. 2017 brings you a really mixed bag of gambles with John Ross and Joe Mixon, Jordan Willis, Carl Lawson. John Ross has been mostly a nothing. Jordan Willis hasn't done shit. Lawson was injured a good portion of this past season. Mixon was even better in 2018. But again, you look at that, just not a lot of help that's come from the draft and not nearly enough help. In 2018, you look at their draft class and you say Billy Price, Jesse Bates, Sam Hubbard. You look at these guys and you're like, okay, there's a couple of guys that have the ability to contribute long-term, but you need more draft classes like that because the talent cupboard is kind of bare in Cincinnati. And the reason you can say that is you look at the numbers on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, and they absolutely sucked. So heading into this offseason, they've got a little bit of cap space to play with. It'll be interesting to see whether they invest in their own talent and also bring in some new guys, or do you sit on that money and save it and maybe go through a bit of a rebuilding mode with a new coach? Maybe it buys you that luxury and affords you that time to do so. And it feels like that might be the right thing to do. But the number one goal of this program, when you look at team needs in the offseason, all right, 8 years, that's enough of Andy Dalton, isn't it, to be the unquestioned, unbridled starter in Cincinnati? That has to be enough, doesn't it? You've had 8 years. He's already in his 30s. You know who he is. You know who he's not. It's time to move the fuck on. You no longer have Marvin Lewis holding you back. It's time to move on. And frankly, it's so bad for Cincinnati and so obvious in terms of the quarterback position that if they gave up a good portion of their draft pick currency to go get one guy in this draft, trading up a little bit to do so, even though this is kind of a shaky quarterback class to want to do that, then that must be what you do. They have to come out of this draft class with a quarterback in round 1. Period. Period. If your next line of defense of was, well, you can still win some games with Andy Dalton, you need to stop and have your head examined. No! It is quarterback, 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 no matter what in this draft. They must get that dude. Period. Point blank. Has to be done. In terms of other areas of need, you could frankly say just about anywhere outside of maybe wide receiver because you still have A.J. Green, you still have Tyler Boyd, and maybe eventually you'll finally get something out of a John Ross. But you look at them offensively, they most certainly need a tight end to replace Tyler Eifert. You really can't continue to count on him anymore. They still need help on the offensive line. Guard, tackle position doesn't really matter. I mean, especially a left tackle. That would certainly be nice. They don't have one right now. Defensively, still feels like they need some help in that linebacking core, which has been a perpetual state of problem for this organization for years. You can talk about Burfict and Ray and so forth, but, Burfict's an idiot, just a complete idiot, and could be one of those examples of eventually you need to move on from him, and it'll be addition by subtraction. They need help everywhere, though. I wouldn't be surprised, even with bringing a new guy in, if this Bengals team is even worse in 2019, even if you have Andy Dalton healthy the whole season, even if you have A.J. Green healthy the whole season, even if miraculously you said your Hail Marys and Tyler Eifert played 12 or more games in the fucking season. The fact is there needs to be a rethinking and a retooling of how the Cincinnati Bengals do business. And this offseason, goal number 1, now that it appears that you have your new head coach, is you must get a new quarterback and turn the page once and for all on the Marvin Lewis era. And the quicker you do that, the better it will be for all people involved long term.